Good afternoon and welcome to Digital Transformation, Building a Successful Infrastructure. To gain customer satisfaction in this hyper-digital environment, banks are investing heavily in innovative digital banking products and services. However, bank speed to market has been hampered by inflexible legacy systems. In this webinar, hosted by Thought Machine, we discuss building a digital infrastructure that will scale with your institution and provide the services your customers want. We thank you for joining us. I am Lexi Grindstaff, Director of Business Development here at Bank Director. This webinar is brought to you both by Bank Director and Thought Machine. An information resource to the financial community since 1991, Bank Director focuses on the strategic issues most fundamental to a bank CEO, senior leadership team, chairman, and independent directors. Thought Machine builds Vault Core and Vault Payments, cloud-native core and payments technology, enabling banks and fintechs to remain competitive and flourish into the future. Vault Core and Vault Payments are the foundation layer of a bank's technology stack. They can run any bank, any product, and any payment set. Before we get started, let me share just a few things to keep in mind today. First off, don't worry, we can't hear you. You have joined this webinar in listen-only mode. We recommend that you click on the slide bar at the bottom of your screen to adjust between the presenters. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please note those by clicking on the Q&A button found on the right-hand side of your screen. You can do this at any time during the presentation, and our presenters will be answering those for you. There is no need to take detailed notes, as this presentation will be shared with all attendees within 24 hours via email. It will also be available on bankdirector.com. If you have any technical issues today, you can note those using the moderator chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will do our best to take care of it. Finally, the opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the individual speaker only and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the other speakers or of the entities with which the speakers are associated. At this time, I'd like to share a little bit about our speakers today. First, we have Ritesh Rahani, a regional director at Thought Machine. He's worked with Lehman, Barclays, Merrill Lynch, Man Investments, and most recently with Temenos and Infosys in North America. Ritesh's experience spans investment analysis, product development, global banking distribution, and core banking technology sales. Next with us today is Clay Adams. Clay became the president and CEO of Mascoma Bank in January 2017. Prior to becoming president, Clay was a member of the bank's board of directors for 5 years. In this capacity, he served on several committees, including chair of the strategic planning and wealth management committees. Also with us today, we have Duncan Bowring, and he is a practicing technology executive, adept in cloud-native architecture and contemporary work methodologies. Before venturing into financial services and delving into third-generation banking cores, Duncan developed and managed real-time interactive platforms in the entertainment sector and later transitioned to the healthcare sector. Finally with us, we have Zach Brunke, the CEO and co-founder of HM Bradley, a technology-first banking platform that aligns itself with the customer by allowing anyone to earn status by what they do, not just what they have, paying consumers up to 3% interest depending on their saving habits. Zach is a Los Angeles-based entrepreneur with a career in mostly fintech, most recently as the CTO of Syndex. So Ritesh, Clay, Duncan, and Zach, please take it away.
Thank you, Lexi, and thank you for assembling such an interesting group of people to talk about a very interesting topic. Let me just begin with how to organize the blueprint to build a modern banking institution. Maybe Clay and Zach, I'll leave this question with you. You two are amongst the most forward-looking bank CEOs that we work with. Can you paint a picture for our audience in terms of what should a modern bank look like for your customers, shareholders, and regulators? And maybe, Clay, we can start with you, given your very unique position in the market.
Sure. Thank you, Ritesh. Just a bit more about Mascoma Bank. We're a $3 billion mutually owned bank based in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. And we serve customers from 28 different locations. And actually, we'll be celebrating our 125th anniversary next year. We're also a certified B Corporation, which is rather unique for banking. So I think the way I look at this, I break it down in a few ways. First, there is the customer. We need to be able to serve them where and when and how they desire. I'd say for a bank like ours that's been around and has the locations we do, the branches and the call center provide incredible personalized advice. And this has been painfully evident in a good way during the current rate environment where we can have conversations with our customers, not necessarily in person, but we know them very well. And it's allowed us to be very competitive on the deposit pricing side of things. I think however, legacy cores don't necessarily offer the technology experience or the digital equivalent of what that personalized branch or call center service is. And that's really what is necessary. I think from a shareholder perspective, as I mentioned, we're mutually owned, and it really means our depositors are our owners. And so it's kind of one and the same with our customers, providing them with a top shelf experience, be it digital or in person. And I will readily admit that being a mutually owned bank is a luxury at this point of time, because we can take a longer term view of tech investments and not worry about the quarterly pressure that might come up. And so that is something that has allowed us to embark upon the technology path that we are. And then finally, I'll say on a regulatory perspective, we have really strong support from our regulators. We're state chartered in New Hampshire, and the Boston Federal Reserve is very encouraging of its community banks to be forward-looking in its digital stance. And I think that they view those community banks as being critical to the ecosystem of banking in this country. And we also risk obsolescence if we don't keep up. So I certainly share that. And partly what we're doing is not only for ourselves, but we hope we're kind of breaking trail for what other community banks can do. And there are elements of what we've done to link up legacy cores with a modern core like Thought Machine, as well as other fintechs that may make it easier for other banks in the future.
Thank you, Clay, for that comprehensive answer. I totally want to dig further into that last statement that you made about being able to link legacy cores with modern cores and the potential that has. Zach, same question to you, and a little bit about H.M. Bradley, of course.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, H.M. Bradley is pretty widely, I think, known as a consumer bank, and that's what we've focused on most of our life. Actually, in more recent memory, some things that have started to change on our end is that we've actually started to contract and help some of these banks modernize and do some of the things that they're looking to do. A lot of that really came from the fact that because early on we started building a foundation, we realized that we had to build a lot of the tools that was necessary to really revolve your bank around a customer. And so when you think about, around a customer, typically I think I used to tell our team very early on that the one advantage that, you would have as a challenger against the traditional banks in the US is that just about every bank that you've ever heard of is structured as a set of fiefdoms. Right? They kind of fight against each other. They're going back and forth. They're not sharing their data across it very well. And as a result of that, the one thing that we did very early on was we built a 360-degree view of the customer in a single pane of glass where you could see every single piece of that. And that was a really critical piece. The other thing that we did, I think that we were very proud of, is the fact that we built an event-driven architecture, meaning that we can actually take a lot of what's happening in your system and react to those things and build unique products and allow you to innovate faster. Thought Machine is a big part of what's behind that. And so we've actually started to transition to actually helping some banks do this and helping some banks get to market with a similar technology set. But on the consumer side, we're still very much running right now, and customers are coming in the door and seeing some of the unique products that we've built. And a lot of it is really built around the idea that because of that unique architecture, because of that single pane glass of view of the customer, we actually can serve both our shareholders and our customers with the same set of ideas and technology. And so I could give you two really pertinent examples of what's been special for H.M. Bradley. The first is what we call routines, and routines are really the evidence of that event-driven architecture. It's any single transaction that happens, any piece of metadata inside that transaction, you can actually react to it, and you can build customized products for customers. And so you can do things like every time my paycheck comes in, split it 3 different ways into 3 different plans, spin up an account number for a plan. Maybe you just want to share a debit card to a certain plan because you want to use that as your child's allowance. Those are all things that you can do inside of systems that we've already built. And it really gives you a lot of flexibility there. It's a great showcase to what can be done on a system like ours, and what I think is pretty necessary in a modern bank at this point. But on the other side of it, there's one other thing that we've done that really kind of hits home that idea of going across that customer and making sure that it's single pane of glass view and you're trying to get them in everything, which is we did something very different when we did credit. So we did credit very early in our life cycle. And we decided early on that the way that credit was being done wasn't really necessarily the right way to do it. And it wasn't because underwriting was bad or anything else. It was because consumers were becoming, having to become their own analysts to decide what product they wanted, what they might be a fit for. When in reality, a bank likely already knows what they might be a fit for and what kind of programs they're looking for. And so we did something very different with what we call one-click credit. And with one-click credit, very simply, we get permissible purpose on the consumer. And then we can underwrite them every single month for any product that we might offer to them, which means that we can push them a fully underwritten offer. And what that looks like to a consumer is instead of saying, hey, please apply for our credit card, we can say something like, hey, Ritesh, here's a credit card offer. It's a $20,000 line of credit with a 15.9% APR. If you want it, take it. And as a result of that, our cross-sell rates on the credit card have been astronomical. So, typical pre-screening in the U.S., you see a 3 to 4% acceptance rate. At Agent Bradley, we've seen about 38% acceptance rate. And on top of that, 65% of people accept it on the first time we present them the offer. And so those are just two small ways that the technology and the foundation that we've built has really laid a foundation for hopefully what a lot of other people can build on and start to see some real fruit in the market as we start to see the rest of the market kind of shift towards a more real-time, a more event-driven architecture and some of the things that I think all of us probably want to see happen in the market.
Thanks for that. Bill pointed out you have missed the regulatory aspect of it. How does the regulator react to all these amazing things that you're doing for your clients?
Yeah, fair. Well, I mean, the single pane of glass is actually super critical to the regulatory aspect, right? Because that's the piece where, and like my background, I think we mentioned before, the last 5 years before this, I was the CTO of an investment bank, which meant I was obviously dealing with FINRA and SEC and had my fingerprints on file in a few places. And so when you're doing that, you also very likely need that big regulatory window, right? And so the way that we've seen this is, we've built the system in a way that we can see every single document someone signed, every single email that we've sent to a customer, every checkbox they've clicked on our website, all goes into our reporting layer that then goes back and gives you a dashboard and a full set of views. And even things like compliance testing, some of the really kind of unsexy things that we don't talk about in banking, we've automated those pieces, and we just built a product internally recently for SCRA reporting. SCRA is one of those things that's cost a lot of people a lot of money over the years in fines. And we said, hey, we want to automate this process and make sure that we're always knowing, what that active data is and what's going on, and make sure that on our credit products that's happening. Those are all, things that we had to build in-house because it didn't exist and there wasn't tools for them. And things that we're now, obviously looking to help others do and hopefully let them see that. But the regulatory piece of it, I think, is really giving the regulators a single pane of glass and a clear view of all of your customers across anything that you're doing. And I think, we've seen this in various ways, but I think one of the problems that I've seen in modern banking is that you have so many program managers like us who start out and they kind of do their own thing and they built their own technology and they're running on a bank that's using software that's meant for a branch-based bank. And as a result, they've got 12 programs with 12 different reporting structures and 12 different ways to show that information. And I think as you think about regulatory, it really is crucial that you have one way to show your customers. There's a reason program banks are continually being shut down to less programs and no one's going to Jamie Dimon and saying, hey, could you go back from 50 million customers to 40 million? You want that reporting layer. You want that to be super clear. And I think on the regulatory side, that's really what you want to do the best. You want to really focus on how you can show where everything is and where it all goes and have it in a consistent manner.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks so much. Duncan, you and I worked on multiple projects together where you've actually helped other financial institutions implement some of these things that Clay and Zach are talking about. I know we mentioned event-driven architecture, we mentioned real-time, but I think cloud is also a very important part of how organizations will re-architect their tech stack. So my question for you is, do you view being cloud native as a must-have for modern banks? I guess the second part is, how do you define being cloud native? What does it exactly mean for you?
Yeah, Ritesh, Zach and Clay kind of covered really well, the modern customer-centric banking landscape, the demand being demanding around the enhanced flexibility, scalability, and innovation requirements. So being cloud native is not a must-have in a strict sense, but it significantly propels banks to meet these demands efficiently. So you could say it offers a competitive advantage that's hard to overlook. Being cloud native is more than just hosting applications on a cloud platform. Like this is a big a big kind of one to really take on board. Right? It's about building and designing applications in a way that harnesses the full potential of cloud computing. And Zach covered it really well there. Modern architectural patterns, reactive event driven and microservices, to develop applications essentially as loosely coupled, independently deployable services or tiers. Very similar to kind of how Thought Machine is architected internally, where the demand on the system kind of changes, it can scale those independently, right? And it's a lot easier to update, scale, and maintain essentially operationally. Further, defining cloud native is, containerization is important fundamentally to enhance portability and scalability, so you can have deployment across different hosting environments and have the service behave in the same way. Modern DevOps practices as well, merging development and operations to streamline the development process, enabling continuous integration and deployment, essentially, increase the reliability and speed of delivery from idea to customer and the feedback loop back again. Immutable infrastructure, treat your infrastructure as code with its own software development lifecycle. Eventually, essentially allows you to create, modify, and destroy infrastructure consistently, and quicker recovery in case of failures. And you have living documentation at that point as well, whereas your code is your documentation. API first development, coming back to architectural patterns, designing robust APIs from the get-go helps ensure seamless integration and interaction between your different services and systems. There's a few other best practices around, centralized logging and monitoring, automated testing and deployment, and essentially scalable and resilient design. Design your systems to be resilient to failures and capable of scaling on demand is a key kind of design principle there. You're basically embracing a cloud-native approach that means aligning your development practices and infrastructure setup to fully leverage the cloud's capabilities, and resulting in enhanced agility, resilience, and a faster pace of innovation that then unlocks the bank of one, or customer-centric banking.
Thanks, Duncan. That's actually a great segue into my next question, I guess, again, for Clay and Zach, maybe leading with you, Zach, first. We talked about modern banking from outside, and Duncan's talked about some of the foundational principles. Let's get under the hood from mid and back office operations and a technology standpoint. To realize the modern banking architecture that we're espousing here and that you're envisioning for your organization, how big of a change are we talking about in terms of tech and operations backbone that supports the day-to-day running of this bank? Zach?
Yeah. There's good news and there's bad news here. The good news is everything that Duncan just said, I completely agree with. I think that's exactly where, everything needs to go. And so the good news is, this has been being done in the rest of the industry outside of banking for, a good half a decade or so. There's quite a bit of technology built in this way, in this manner. There's a lot of scalability. Every, consumer facing or B2B enterprise company that you've heard of is probably running on a foundation like this for the most part, with the exception of airlines. Just about everyone has already gone this way. And so, and one really great piece of advice is, hey, we're not having to pave a new path. The path's already been paved. We just need to follow it now. The blueprint's there. And I think that's what we all have to look forward to is, hey, we're building on a real, solid set of foundations here. This isn't us playing with something. This isn't trying to take something to the market that's never been done before. But I always tell the story. My mom actually ran a cash vault at Regions Bank for 33 years. And as it works, cash vaults are kind of going away, right? And in today's market, moving money is really just moving data. And yet most banks aren't really built to move data at scale, right? They've got a processor that's doing all of this for them and probably doing all these pieces. It leaves them with a lot of inflexibility and a lot of unstable systems. And frankly, not a lot of way to go around and build customized products. And I think what these new foundations give you is the ability to go and do something much more unique. And I think the way that we usually put it is look, your bank is unique, which means that your tech stack probably should be too. You need to build something flexible enough that you can build something more customized to your own customer so that you can stand out in the crowd and you can go and do that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the short of it is to go and do these things. There's a lot that needs to change as far as current banks and their infrastructure goes. But there's also a phrase that I'm very fond of. There's only two ways in this world to make money, and it's bundling things and unbundling things. and you've bought a bundled core for a long time, and it's probably a bad set of options today. And hopefully what we can do is find a way to either bundle some really good options together or take piece by piece and build the right foundation for your bank. And that's really a lot about the way that we think about it. How do we help, this institution find the right pieces for them, put those right pieces together, plug it into their modern core, give them that modern stack, but also give them the peace of mind that, look, this isn't a fly-by-night foundation that's never been proven before. Google's been doing this at scale for a decade. You're going to be okay. You're going to run on this, and you're going to do it well. And in most cases, that should mean taking a single product to market on a new core, on a modern foundation, putting it out to market, showing it work, and then showing your bank the benefits of what you get out of that. And so, yeah, look, I mean, the benefit here really is that, this path has been paved. We're following a very well-known playbook at this point. And what we should be able to do is bring the industry forward in a way that's not bringing a whole bunch of risk. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see made a lot in banks and bank CEOs, they're obviously risk averse, and they should be, but everyone sees moving your core as the riskiest thing that you'll ever do. And while that's relatively true, it's if you're doing it all at once. The big bang approach to moving your core needs to die. And I think that's what we're hoping to see here, is that we're hoping to see a transition to a more modern infrastructure, to a more modern set of technologies, but also doing it in a way that makes a lot more sense in today's market, and doing it with tools that really give you that purview of the customer from the jump. And I think that's really, we're on the beginning of what feels like a real shift in movement in this market. And I think, a lot of it is really, we've got Netflix and Google and Facebook and a lot of those others to thank for having laid this modern foundation that we can build off of.
It's funny you talk about Google. Our first principles are coming out of our leadership team's experience at Google. So you're absolutely right. This technology has been around for a long time. It's only coming to financial services now. Clay, at the expense of repeating the same question to you, how big of a lift was it from a mid to back office operations perspective doing this?
It's a substantial lift, but I agree with just about everything Zach said, and it's very analogous to us. And I wasn't in banking before joining as CEO, and it was one of the most surprising things I found when I came in was not the regulatory burden for banks, which is significant compared to other industries, but it was really the mediocrity of the user and customer experience. And we touched on some of that before with the native cloud pieces that had been done in other industries. And I think that's really that type of thinking we're looking at and bringing that to community banking. And really, I think what the technology lift is that we're doing is, I'd say, arguably a full rebuild, because it is the bank in the box that is the legacy core model. We've been years in the planning of this, and now we're in the execution mode, and it really means we're replacing just about everything that the legacy core does with a different best-in-breed fintech solution of our choosing. And to me, that's incredibly powerful. It's not turnkey, so it's in some ways you have more cats to herd, but it does give us a lot more control over our internal and customer experiences and the data that goes along with them. As I mentioned, it's happening in execution phase right now, and we're doing that in phases. And I couldn't agree more with Zach. And we all know across this industry, the weekend cutover, you kind of cross your fingers and pray that it's going to work, and it doesn't always work. And so we have de-risked that by doing this in phases. And that doesn't just mean like we're rolling out digital banking right now, for example, but we will be able to migrate off of our legacy core and onto Thought Machine in phases with customers a little bit at a time until we're entirely comfortable with it. And that gives us a lot more control and less risk in our world. So that's the technology part is kind of a little bit easier to solve, I think. The harder part is kind of your question was getting to, I think, is the operations and the culture. And we've been talking about years at this point, continuous improvement and the necessity of doing that to remain relevant and give our customers the best experience that they deserve, that we all know in our own digital lives outside of banking. And everyone loves this change and the newness conceptually, even with the communication and the training, but when really the change is happening, it can get hard because people's, particularly internally, day-to-day lives, the way they've done them in some cases for many years, are changing. Operationally, we took a hard look at these things and didn't want to just replicate all of the workflows in the back office that were happening on the legacy technology. And so we've optimized a lot of that, and we identified 800 legacy workflows, and we're going to move that down to about 200. That took some revisioning, and it also reduces a lot of manual work that still happens in the back offices of a lot of banks. So there's a savings opportunity there. There's a quality improvement opportunity there. We're excited about that. I will also say, just from a cultural perspective, there is the necessity of having full alignment among the CEO, the board, and the senior leadership team to do something like we're doing, which is the full replacement. With that said, there are incremental ways to do this that is a step at a time, that over the course of a contract with a core, which in many cases still run many, many years, we can kind of wean ourselves off of those and onto something that is a more modern experience that relevant is a word I use a lot. It keeps us relevant.
Thanks, Clay. And again, lots of very important topic points that came about. And I think one thing I do want to dig into is the process of making this happen, moving from legacy to modern. And I think the house view is probably that it should not be a big bang transformation. It should be progression over time so we can take care of a lot of these things that Clay, you addressed. But Duncan, as a practitioner in the market, what's your view on big bang versus progressive and the challenges thereof?
Yeah, big bang versus progressive transformation. There are pros and cons to each of them, right? Like there's a swift all-at-once transition, cloud native, higher risk, substantial preparation up front versus progressive transformation, gradual adaptation, learning, risk management, smoother transition. I lean towards progressive kind of transformations generally. I kind of want to come back around to kind of what Clay was saying. It's a really, really important point based on what I've seen inside banking and out. Transitioning to a cloud native paradigm is not merely a technological shift. It's a holistic transformation. It has to encompass cultural, operational, and organizational dimensions. Your transition to cloud native, we've covered some of that around re-architecting the entire technology stack, to embrace new principles, which lays the groundwork for where you want to go with an enhanced agility. But the cultural transformation, foster that culture of continuous learning, as Clay and Zach kind of mentioned, right? Collaboration, adaptability, breaking down silos, cross-functional teams, nurture that mindset of iterative improvement and customer centricity is as important. It's almost like an enterprise-wide reinvention. Streamline the processes, optimize operations, and adopt a customer-centric model. That transformation can sometimes be harder and need more phases than the technology transformation in some cases. I've seen technology-led transformations fail ultimately because the organizational structure can't support what is required to get the benefit out of the technology, if that makes sense. So, the choice between big bang or progressive, right? It's influenced by factors, risk tolerance, operational complexity, strategic goals. But the journey towards a modern technology stack and a cloud native paradigm is a strategic endeavor that goes beyond technology. Align the entire enterprise, forward-looking vision, deliver superior value to customers, stakeholders, and the wider community. That's kind of how I would summarize it. But there's obviously a streamlined approach to kickstart that journey too. But I could probably eat the rest of the time just going through some of those points.
Well, thank you, Duncan. Thank you so much for that. Let me just take a quick question from the audience. I know we talked about the technology, the operation, the processes, and it's a very pertinent question. I'll just read it out verbatim. Is tech modernization posing a challenge from a talent and skill set perspective, or is it helping you in some way? And maybe, Clay, given that you're with a regional bank, let's talk about how it's impacting you.
I think it's been a great help. So it's interesting. I think the legacy model that community banks have been under, they have not had to think about technology themselves. They have it's been done for them, to them. And that partnership worked for a long time, decades. However, banks need to take more agency in that and have technology, skill, and ability in-house, because every business is a tech business, whether you're a bank or anything else. As we have added more modern technology, we do a lot with Thought Machine, we do a lot with Salesforce, and others that I think are becoming household names. That in and of itself is an attractor to tech talent. people want to work with modern technology, and that makes hiring.
Did we lose Clay?
Yeah, we lost Clay.
So while we wait for the comeback, maybe Zach, I can pose the same question to you.
Combination has allowed us to attract a lot of tech talent.
We lost you for a little bit, Clay, but you know what? I'll just park that and move on to Zach as well to address the same question.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is one of the nuances of this that it ends up scaring a lot of people, especially when you start talking about kind of the mid-sized banks and lower, where they start saying, "Oh gosh, this is so much to bite off. We don't think of ourselves as software companies. We don't think of ourselves as building things. We don't really even employ developers." And by the way, I mean, when I say mid-sized banks, I mean there's a lot of several $100 billion banks that still think this way, right? So it's not just kind of smaller shops. It's a lot of folks because they're used to buying that, and their core is something that they're kind of used to. They have a vendor for, and that's it. And it costs them some money, but they don't realize some of the things they're missing out on it. But I also think that there is really kind of a happy medium in there where you bring in a set of people that really deeply understand something, and then you also bring on, whether it's contractors or systems integrators, the kind of things that Duncan and myself are probably both working on in situations. A great way to kind of dip your toe in the water, get something to market, see it work. I think one of the bigger mistakes that I see is that a lot of banks that they're thinking about a core migration or a transition onto a new modern core, next gen core as we call them, is they're doing this in a way that they sort of automatically believe that this is a very long, very expensive project that if it doesn't work, they're going to get fired. And that's a really terrible way to take on a project like this because there's a lot of inertia against it. And so, what we've kind of encouraged and what we're seeing a lot more of, and I think is an encouraging thing for the market and certainly for the consumer who will ultimately win in this, is that you're seeing people take approaches of, hey, I can do this piece by piece, project by project. Maybe I don't have to get fired if it doesn't work out because I'm not, committing to hiring 100 people and building something out, but I'm committing to taking on a smaller team that's going to guide, a set of outside people that will eventually get us to teaching ourselves and teaching us how to fish. To Clay's earlier point, there's a lot of fintechs that are building software that are selling into banks now. Like they started selling into fintechs and they realized banks are actually great customers. And 5 years ago when I started H&M Bradley, if you had told me I'd have been selling into a bank, I would have just banged my head against a wall and thought, well, that's terrible. Today, it's a very different market. I think you're seeing banks realize that this modern technology can actually help, and there can be places they can plug in and be useful, and the sales cycles don't have to be nearly as long as they used to be or as onerous. And I think that's a net win for all banks. I think there's a place where we're finally starting to get to where you can put together some of the best in breed, best in class softwares without having a ton of in-house talent to do that all, right? There are pieces. I mean, a lot of what we're focusing on at H&M Bradley is a compatibility layer. So we can just answer the question, can it adapt to our core? Yes. The answer is yes. That's what we're trying to help you build. And, no, do you want to have developers building things like, 1099 reporting or statements? Probably not. That's probably not a terribly useful thing for you. Let's find a vendor for that. Let's put them in. Let's plug it in and make sure it works. You don't need an in-house team to do that because, as we all know, statements are very well regulated by the government. They have a very consistent functionality, and it wasn't because all the banks came together and said this is what they should look like. It's because the regulators did. And as a result of that, there's a lot of things that you can find off the shelf, really great options for, and it's a lot less daunting than I think most people think it is at the jump on like what it looks like to go and hire a team and how big does that team need to be. I see it all too often where people just automatically jump to, oh my gosh, this is going to cost, hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars, depending on the size of their bank. And it just doesn't have to in some cases. You can do it a lot more efficiently than that. And with a lot of modern vendors and get really best in class software in a much more efficient manner and hopefully make your team a lot more efficient as well. I think that's one of the things that we forget about. I mean, Clay just brought up Salesforce and I'll pick on them a little bit. I usually joke that if you're a really modern, forward-thinking bank, you might be on Salesforce as CRM, but it's actually kind of a terrible CRM for banks, if we're being honest. Like there's a lot that you could do better for it, but it is kind of the golden standard right now, right? And I think that's a lot of what we focused on when we started building ours was how do you actually give that single pane of glass view, and how do you let them action from it, and not by hacking together a bunch of APIs that have been hacked together for a whole lot of other CRM related things, but purpose built for a bank. And I think you'll see, more of those types of technologies pop up, more purpose-built for banks, because as banks modernize, those technologies just become more and more important because more and more people need them. And it takes a lot of sophistication to make Salesforce a good CRM for your bank, and it takes not much to screw it up, unfortunately. And so I think there's a mix in there of like trying to find what those vendors are and who those vendors are as they pop up, watching the market, but also just realizing that it's not all going to be in-house, and it doesn't all have to be giant expenditures to get something really powerful that can really serve you well.
Thanks, Zach. Duncan, you and your teams do this at scale, right? Zach and Clay come at it from a bank angle. They have smaller teams. How are you finding this challenge around talent? Is it difficult to source? Are you finding it different than old COBOL programming versus new modern languages and other systems?
It's a great question. There's actually, I think there's a positive. I'm seeing more net positive in, the modernization itself, right? I think it has a net positive in attracting and retaining top talent. The innovative solutions and better customer experiences generally, but the types of technologies involved, and Zach covered it really well. A lot of those skills are transferable. Industry to industry, particularly around cloud or modern architecture and things like that, and attracting them to these organizations in the banking space, is happening more just because a lot of the top talent want to be involved in innovative organizations that are trying to do things in a modern way, if that makes sense. So I'm not really seeing it to be a difficult thing in the sense of like attracting or retaining this talent, because it's out there in the marketplace. It's just banking has become more competitive to what's traditionally in other industries now. That makes sense. And, I don't want to kind of scare banks, to Zach's point, to echo kind of what he was saying. I want to scare that it needs to be, we now need to change our entire talent pool. It can be done with small targeted teams to, essentially innovate on whether it's one product or coexistence with an existing core and existing teams and things like that. I see being complementary, and again, it's banking has now just joined the competitive landscape because the top talent is on the modern technology. It's transferable.
Well, that's very, very pertinent. That all modern technology is existent everywhere except in banking. Therefore, there is lots of talent available. I just want to quickly go back to some other questions that we've been asking each other. Let's talk about the bank's value chain, right? What are some of the key areas that are or will be most impacted as banks go through this modernization effort? Again, Clay, I look at you, given that you've done it at scale at Mascoma. So what are the different parts that get impacted and how?
I think the first one for us, I think where you have to start always is really the customer. And so it's creating a better digital experience for the customer. It's a more modern, as I said, what we're used to in our other aspects of our digital lives. It's more real time, and it's also just faster and better performant. So I think that's number one for us. I think very closely aligned to that is our employees, and just as what we were talking about, people want to have modern technology and not having to change the address in 6 different locations and having to manually proof it afterwards. And so that's kind of something that is getting at the efficiency piece. And it's a better internal user experience, which we want to be able to provide that improves employee engagement, retention, and ultimately I think helps the bottom line. Moreover, I think, and this gets to something that Zach was saying earlier, creating something for the employee, for the user experience, is a single pane of glass, so that we're not switching again between disparate systems, but you can actually serve the customer better when they're in front of you, either in a call center or in a branch environment. I would also add security and quality. Automation will help us do that. There'll be more checks and balances, so that yes, we can have all of the processes in the world, but if they're manual and they're the right checks and balances, they're still going to get messed up at some point. So this is allowing us, and fraud is a big deal for every financial institution these days, to integrate more quickly with more modern fraud detection and prevention tools. and by and large, trying to shift to more of a knowledge worker mindset versus one where there is manual printing and validating things across systems, which still happens in a lot of financial institutions. And then the last thing I'll say is kind of marketing. And we, as an industry, and every institution as part of it, have amazing data and information on our customers that can help make their lives easier, but we don't always have access to it. And putting it in a different environment where it's more accessible, and then we can leverage those data is critically important. And there are so many different ways this is beneficial. The studies are overwhelming that once you make a transformation like this, you will have better financial results. It is a financial lift in the meantime, but I think it's one we're taking a long-term view of.
Very pertinent. And Zach, you're pioneering event-driven architecture, right? Even more so than a lot of other organizations that we work with. Any particular impact from that onto these or other parts of the value chain?
I think Clay hit on probably the three most important ones, I think, from the event-driven perspective. But let's start with fraud, because that's the one that's obvious and we all think about. Your batch-based system is costing you money, period. That's like the simplest way I can put it. Waiting overnight to figure out if that transaction was a problem or not is a bad problem for you. There's just no other way to put it. And doing something like an event-driven real-time system, what that means is we're scoring those transactions instantly as they happen. Which, I mean, every minute in fraud is an amazing time to get back, right? And so now imagine getting hundreds of minutes back every single day with every single transaction. In credit cards, we realize this pretty well, right? Like fractions of seconds make a difference. Yet in things like typical banking transactions, we're just okay with waiting for overnight batch processes to end. And it's a really bad part of the current system, and it does cost us a lot of money. And I think it's something that's not even obvious. When we were building, originally, we went with one of these new modern age fraud vendors and said, hey, we're going to help you with ACH. And we used their product for about 6 months, and then they called us and they said, what are you doing to stop fraud? And we started laughing, and we said, why are you asking us? Your fraud's incredible. We've never seen anything like it. It was like, well, yeah, because we're scoring everything in real time. We're seeing things happen fast. We're putting those patterns together. But security is the other piece of that makes a big difference. Things like account takeovers, we had a credential stuffing attack, fairly early on in our life cycle, and we told the customers about it. People were like, why did you do that? You didn't have to tell them that happened. That happens all the time. And it was like, well, look, we caught it. We mitigated it. We know that there was no risk from it, but we also want to be transparent about what that means. That, hey, those credentials are out there. We've also built products to help mitigate things like that. And so we actually, one of the features of our product is if you use something like Plaid, you can actually generate usernames and passwords specific to individuals that work just on Plaid and also do not work on our login screens. So you can't go to our login screen and use those. And by the way, if someone does go to our login screen and use those, we get an alert so we can alert the customer and tell them, hey, someone's got a hold of the password that you generated for X. Whether that was at some other bank or at some other, PFM tool or whatever that is. And it lets us do things like stay on top of security breaches, password breaches, those kinds of things. We can automatically alert our customers when passwords breached, and it's in a known database. That's a really nice thing that a lot of modern technology stacks allow you to do. But the other piece that Clay hit on that I really loved is the marketing piece. I think it's just so underlooked and underutilized. We were fortunate to hire a lot of really smart people. We hired somebody from a top 5 bank that had been in marketing their entire career in banking and been in 2 of the top 5. And their comment when they first came in was, the systems that you have for marketing would be $100+ million project at my last institution. It's just unbelievable. And the fact of it is they're tools that e-commerce has had for, again, a very long time. These are all tools that are modern and usable, but you've got to build them in a secure manner, and you've got to build them in a way that that you've got that one ID. But for us, to Clay's earlier point, we have a single ID that ties back to a consumer in every single record they've ever had, whether it's addresses, phone numbers, whatever that is. And we can see when they had those, when they changed those, and it's all going back to that one thing. And that single ID really allows us to touch them across every single piece of the life cycle of the customer. So, our life cycle marketing is one of those things that's just so easy for us to do because you have that one record, because you have that one thing. And with these modern systems, it's much stronger and a lot easier. And your data is not stuck inside your core. CIF doesn't become your headache. It actually becomes a thing for you that's valuable. So I think those three pieces are the ones I would probably harp on the most, to be honest. And I don't think you can understate the value of any of them, really. I think to Clay's point, you will definitely find benefits of this. And it may seem like an expensive project, but I think what you'll realize in the end is the expensive part is not doing anything, because not only are you eventually going to be out of a job most likely, but even if you do survive, it's costing you money every single day.
Thanks, Zach. There is a very interesting question from the audience. I'm just picking up amongst a few that we have, and Duncan will start with you on that. And this is tying together a lot of threads that we've talked about. And again, I'll read verbatim. When we think about changing our core system incrementally instead of as the big bang, how do you see a $1 or $2 billion bank that's already operating very lean on resources do that successfully, to be able to support multiple cores, double the integration, and operating our two systems? So maybe again, Duncan, starting with you as your experience, and then moving across the group.
To be fair, it's probably more appropriate for the bank guys, Clay and Zach. But from when I look at it strictly from operational and technology side of things, right? Your connective tissue, like the coexistence kind of strategy, is like the most important piece here. How do you essentially do this successfully? Basically, do more with the same team type of thing. It comes back to a lot of the principles that. Well, your strategy has to be right, number one, to be able to support that. But it comes back to a lot of the other principles about competent infrastructure, like the technology selection, DevOps approach, things like that. Right? If you can, it lowers the people to kind of product ratio operationally to go forward with it. If you can do these things up front around kind of the modern side of things, right? That incorporates all of the things before: immutable infrastructure, DevOps practices, automated testing and deployment. You essentially can speed up that feedback loop or tighten up that feedback loop from developer to deployment to customer and back again, and reduce the operational overhead with it. It's not a one answer fits all kind of solution there though. But the actual migration or coexistence strategy, right? There's a lot of data inputs to that as well. The scaffolding or the connective tissue you built needs to be able to support moving accounts or moving certain types of products and things like that, right? And it needs to integrate with your ecosystem. So, to the other part of the question around double the integrations, that there is an element of scaffolding that has to go up during construction and comes down at the end. But what that is and how to maintain that can be mitigated, at least operationally.
Thanks, Duncan. And Clay, you're going on this journey right now as we speak, so you'll have a unique perspective on this.
Yeah, I think transitioning in the traditional sense from one to the other over a weekend is going to be disruptive and expensive in the time leading up to it and the time beyond. And so it's kind of a normal distribution, if you think of that, where you're trying to kind of have all that peak happen. And to us, it's happening over the course of about a year, where we're migrating the effort and both the expense is kind of coming up to it, and then it'll phase down and we'll have greater savings on the back end. So over the long term, this will work out financially very well for us, but in a certain period, it is more expensive and more disruptive. And so that's going to happen either way, whether we're doing it the way we're doing it or the way it's been done traditionally. We've kind of, one of the things we've, out of necessity, which we didn't going into this planning several years ago, we hadn't anticipated this, but we've developed a platform that allows us to migrate things in an incremental manner so that it's not that switchover. And that, again, gets back to that de-risking. And so that platform is something that I'll just call it, it's a very smart data switch that it will route things to one core or another, or to one fintech digital bank or fraud software or another, without necessarily by hitting the APIs that we have installed in this data switch. So that's allowed us to be able to do that at a reasonably inexpensive way, and again, de-risking it at the same time. So I think we're a bit of a guinea pig in this on ourselves, and so far I still have a job.
A very successful guinea pig. Zach, same question to you. Again, you're living this, right? You are dealing with the transition.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and look, I think it's a very pertinent question, and I think the size of the bank's a very relevant, question here. Is how does a $1 or $2 billion bank do this? I will say though, like I don't think it matters, and I've talked to every range of them from a couple $100 million bank to a several $100 billion, even $1 trillion bank, and it turns out that everyone feels under resourced all the time, right? So that's just the universal truth, is you'll always feel under resourced no matter how large or how small you are. But in a bank of this size, I think one of the things that I would certainly recommend is what you would call more of a lab concept, where you can bring on someone that can give you some more out of the box options and still customize some defaults, but bring on something where you can stand it up pretty quickly. You kind of have a set, and then you do similar to what a lot of program managers do already in some ways. Like if you're trying to think about, okay, how does it tie out? What's going on? You have to do things like run a separate ACH process, which means that you should probably be posting all those back to your original core as well into an FBO account and reconciling against those and just making sure that it ties out completely as you would expect. Those are the kinds of things that I would say that you can easily do, and you can give a smooth transition. I think what you'll see very quickly is, if let's just say that like you've got a checking account concept that you want to do, and maybe it's a little bit more unique product that you have on your current core. One of the bigger problems that most of these banks I've seen have with their current core is that they're offering the same product that everyone else that has that vendor is offering. Nothing's different between the two. One of the most interesting parts of having something like a Thought Machine behind the scenes is that you can create a unique product that's unique for your customer set, because it's a lot faster to put something like that to market. So in doing that, I think what you'll see very quickly is if you can do something like that and you can put a new product to market, what you actually will see is you'll notice that your team actually likes working on that, and they feel like they're a lot more operationally efficient in the tools that they have around it, to the point where they're going, can we get more products on this? And I think it'll eventually take care of itself. And so you will have a lean team, and it will be stressful. And I think the most stressful part is honestly pulling the trigger and making the decision. I think what I've seen is, as the people do it, I've rarely heard I've never heard someone go back, and I've rarely heard anyone really regret it at any sort of scale, because you do get those efficiencies back pretty quickly, especially, and Clay made the joke, of changing an address 6 times, but like, it's not that much of a joke. We all seen it. We've all seen what these systems look like, and it can really be that. And so when you have some of that piece, and you can have maybe a vendor or a couple of vendors stand up as what I would call a sane set of defaults, and really kind of have more of a traditional like bank in a box or a lab concept with some customizability for your bank, that's what I would recommend in that scenario. If you're a much larger bank with much more resources, you might feel differently. You might want to take on piece by piece. But on the smaller scale, that's what I would certainly say is like, hey, like there are vendors out there like with what we're doing, where we can help you stand it up pretty quickly. We can give you a lot of customizability and flexibility, but without a lot of operational burden there. And I think that's really critical to how you can do this well, because otherwise you do run the risk of it becoming cumbersome. And look, the integrations really at some point need to be on the vendors that you choose, and making sure that they integrate well. And you need that answer, because if you don't hire a bunch of developers and you're not writing the code, then what does that integration even mean, and what does it look like? And so you're seeing a lot of, I think there was a no-code movement, so to speak. You're seeing a lot of that kind of thing, but I think the reality is there are vendors that can help you set this thing up, that can help you stand it up pretty quickly, can help you realize the benefits of it, and then you can always go deeper and customize more later as you've kind of transitioned to that. But I think what you'll find very quickly is you'll see the efficiencies in the operations of that team really quickly, even at a pretty small scale.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. Lexi on the tight ship, so I only have 1 minute for a last final question. So rapid fire, starting with you, Zach. What are the 3 most important things you would offer to banks who are probably embarking on the same journey as you?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the 3 most important things are, one is that time is not on your side. So I would tell you that you should start moving yesterday. We're in a world where I think we see a lot of it shifting, and so that's a piece of it. I think 2 is realizing some of those operational efficiencies faster. The only way to really do that is to get moving, and you will see that pretty quickly. I think the last piece that's pretty important is just realizing that you can deliver a better consumer experience with these new modern products. And the consumer experience is ultimately what will differentiate you and keep you alive. And I think that's one of the things that is very much on the minds of a lot of banks out there right now, is how are we going to differentiate? How are we going to be unique? And newsflash, you're not going to do that running on the exact same product offering that everyone else is running on as well. So you better find a way to be unique and to stand out and to build something customized for your users. And I don't mean like, here's a debit card for your kids' little league. I mean, actually do something that you're meeting your customers where they are. And this modern technology and the modern stacks that you have can really help you do that.
Duncan, same for you. 3 things you want to offer banks.
I have to echo Zach there. Move faster, try something, encourage experimentation and new ways of working. What that rolls up to is, for me, the top 3 things. Look beyond the tech. Technology is a big part of this, but it's not the only part. Well-rounded plan, tech people and daily operations is crucial, and that means building a learning and teamwork culture. Encourage continuous learning, bring out new ideas, make it easier to adapt to changes. This will be the engine that drives innovation in your bank. This is the engine that will encourage experimentation, that will try those new cores, that will come up with the new ideas for integration and things like that. So, to support that, right, we are in banking. Strong rules and risk checks, clear rules and a good system to spot and handle risks early are vital. You not only just keep things secure, but you want to support a fast feedback loop pipeline, allow you to quickly learn from actions, make improvements, and keep the innovation pipeline moving smoothly, but also manage the risks. So well-rounded plan is learning and teamwork culture, strong yet flexible risk management, I think, are key to navigating the changes that are exciting in banking.
Awesome. Thank you, Duncan. Last question to you, Clay. 3 things.
So rapid fire, I'd say alignment. It's important to have, before embarking on something like this, the board, senior leadership team, and key staff all in alignment. It just takes 1 or 2 people to be disruptive and not on board to make the project like these transformations difficult. I think it's important for senior leadership teams and boards to have technology talent and knowledge to help interpret some of these things, because there is some investment. Second, I'd say this can be done incrementally. You kind of, the adage, you eat an elephant 1 bite at a time. And so taking it in that approach, but to the point Zach and Duncan made, you got to move. You got to move on this stuff. It can't take forever. And then lastly, it's kind of the plan, because as much as moving fast is important and getting alignment, you will save a lot of headache down the road if you do this in a planful way. And again, that is having some of the agency in this and having some of the tech ability and knowledge inside the organization to be a good consumer.
Thank you so much, all 3 of you. And now, Lexi, back to you for the wrap. I know I'm a little late, so thank you for being patient.
No problem. Thank you, Ritesh. As a reminder to everyone watching, you will receive the recorded version of this webinar within 24 hours. It will also be posted on bankdirector.com. I want to thank the whole panel today, Ritesh, Clay, Duncan, Zach, and Thought Machine for co-hosting. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.